Hello. So I went over in a previous video how I set up my traps as far as the frame configuration. But some people have had some questions about how I do the starter strips and the fishing line. It's not my own idea. I'm sure I found it on YouTube, and this is how I do it. But one of the things you got to remember if you're going to be running swarm traps is, and you're fortunate enough to catch, is every catch you need 10 more frames. You need 5 more frames to pack out your deep if you're running a 10 frame deep, and then you need 5 more frames to bait your hive again. So every catch is 10 frames, and I don't like any downtime, so I want to make sure that I have them in stock and ready to go. So I'm just going to go over here how I take care of my frames. In every trap I have one plastic foundation, and these fit fine, so I don't have to do any tacking in or anything like that. And then I do wax them myself, even though this comes heavily waxed. I wax them again myself, especially if they've been sitting for a year. Plus in transit, they bounce around, the wax falls off. You can see wax all over here. So I always do coat them again for putting back in the trap after I catch. With the starter strips, I take usually yellow, and I can cut a deep frame or a deep plastic foundation frame into 7 strips. Sometimes I only get 6. They don't have to be very long. They will munch up your hands, so make sure you wear gloves. So I'll put it in usually with the flattest side facing down so that it fits nice. These are inch brads. If I go at the correct angle, they don't protrude. Sometimes they do, and I just nip them. Make sure you're always wearing safety glasses. I usually only put 3. Make sure the air gun's at a light setting so you don't send them all the way through. You want it hanging on a little bit on this side so that it pinches it. And there you go. That's one right there. So again, I trim these. Usually get 7 out of each one. Find my flattest side. Push that in my frame. Sometimes they're tighter than others, and that's why I wear the gloves. You can't hit them with a mallet. I like to make sure it's all the way in there. 2 on one side. One on the other. So now on to the fishing line reinforcement. I use these 3/4 inch nails. Make sure they have a broad, flat head or it won't work. And I was using 20-pound tests, and now I'm going to bump it up to 30. Get my fishing line at Walmart for super cheap. I had some breakage with the 20, although it was long after the comb was drawn and not that big of a deal. But I'm going to try 30, see how it goes. So you run it through here, make a complete circle. Make sure you leave enough to work with. Trim it. Before I get too far ahead of myself. Take the nail, find the middle point, pound it in on the side rail. Take your fishing line. You don't have to do any crazy knots or anything like that. Just 2 overhand knots. Trying to keep it as tight as possible. Tighten it down. Stretch it over your nail. Pound your nail the rest of the way down. and trim your tag lines. Test it. Good to go. These have 4 holes in them, but I'm basically just looking for reinforcement all the way through the drawing process, as low to the bottom as possible. So I'm pretty comfortable with this. So again, get your nail. Find your halfway point. Pound the nail in about halfway. Take your fishing line. There's other ways to tension them, but I find this to be the easiest. It doesn't require a jig, and it gets them just as tight. Sometimes you'll find that your holes weren't drilled out all the way. So that one I'll have to come back to. Thread it around. Try and cover as much area of the frame as you can, so as they draw right into this fishing line. The other nice thing about fishing line is if you ever find yourself having to cut it to get a queen cell or something like that, you can do it easy. You don't have to play around with any foundation. Like I've said before, in my deeps I really run 2 plastic foundation at the most, unless they've gotten one from another colony or something like that. But 2 full sheets of plastic foundation, 8 starter strip frames. That's what I put in there. I do get what some would probably consider a lot of drone cell drawing and stuff like that, but from what I understand and from what I've seen, they may not store pollen in a drone cell, but they'll definitely store nectar in a drone cell. So if it's got a bunch of drone cells on it going into winter, they're still going to use it. They're just not going to use it for pollen. If this wasn't such a soft area, there you go. Pound it in, trim your tag lines, and that's how I put the fishing line in these with the starter strips. Just 3 brad nails, 1 flathead nail, 3/4 inch, and 30-pound test fishing line for now. We'll see how it goes. On to the final step, which is waxing of the frames. I bought myself a dollar store crock pot. I think it was under 10 bucks. It's perfect for 1 pound of wax. That's 1 pound of wax in there. I can't put more, but it takes too long to melt it, so I find just putting 1 pound of wax in there at a time works great. So I melt it down completely. It doesn't have a temperature control, so I do watch it so I don't burn the wax. Once it's melted completely, then I use an acrylic brush, acrylic paint brush. I was using those foam brushes, but thanks to JC's Bees, also a YouTuber, he was the one who recommended acrylic brushes, and it works great for me. Some use rollers. My pot's kind of small, so to put it in there sideways, I don't get it on there as well with the depth of the wax, melted wax. So I use the acrylic brush, dip it in there, and just run it a couple brushes on each side of the full foundation frames. Just give it a fresh coating. Sometimes I'll drip some in there to hold it a little better, but in no time at all, they'll have it glued up in the hive. And then for these, I make sure there's a good coat of wax here on this edge, especially if it's one of my cut edges. So I will put it on there well, get it all over this, and I do the paint brushes or the fishing line as well. Again, to those black brushes. Those black brushes start to fall apart, those cheap foam ones. They get all in your cells with your melted wax. They look horrible. They just give them more work to do. And then also when you're doing the fishing line, it wants to cut into those brushes. So I'm glad to be away from that. Again, the acrylic brush is best. You can use foam. So once I'm done with all these, I store them because, like I said in the beginning, if you're lucky enough to catch, you better have 10 more frames. I don't like any downtime with my swarm traps. I like to immediately get it back up in the same exact spot that it caught in, because that's a proven spot, and secondary swarms, cast-off swarms, or even original swarms for other colonies in the area are going to go there. So I like to turn them quick and keep as many frames as possible as I need. So I'm running 6 traps right now. I'll have 60 when I'm done with this, and it's still not enough. So if you're in beekeeping, you know that the frames is never enough. But that's how I do them. If you got any questions, please ask. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Also share if you could. And thanks for watching Fishing for Bees.